Okay, welcome back to the channel, everyone. Thank you once again for taking time out of your day to check the videos out. As always, I appreciate the continued support. We have more PlayStation news, rumors, and leaks to go over and discuss in this video today. So before we dive into these topics, do me a big favor and hit the like button to help this video out and show it your support. And if you are new here to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button as well. The first topic we're discussing is something that caused quite the conversation online when it started to make the rounds. That is the fact that Sony made it clear that they are planning to launch over 10 live service games by 2026, which is pretty crazy. And I think for most people that comes as a surprise. For many of you listening to this, it might not come as that much of a surprise because we've been talking about this for some time now. Not only have we been acknowledging Sony's desire to want to expand into the multiplayer side of gaming and the live service side of gaming, but we've been covering many job listings from many of Sony's studios and their partner studios, and it became pretty apparent that many of these studios, on top of working on single player games, are also working on multiplayer live service games. But we have a write-up from VGC that we're turning to where the title reads, Sony has 10 live service games in development. So they say here, Sony has revealed during its earnings call that it plans to ship 10 live service games by 2026, while speaking on the recent acquisition of Bungie for $3.6 billion. Chief Financial Officer Hiroki Totoki has revealed that the Destiny developer is working on a major new IP and that the company plans to harness Bungie's experience in the live service space going forward. While it wasn't made clear if Bungie would be developing any of these titles, it appears that many first-party developers, including The Last of Us studio Naughty Dog, are currently working on live service titles. Speaking during the call, transcribed by VGC, on what Bungie will bring to PlayStation, Totoki said, quote, "Our studios will learn from Bungie. That is a strong wish we have that Bungie's side is willing to work closely with us," unquote. PlayStation has become known for its blockbuster single-player games, such as Spider-Man, The Last of Us, and Ghost of Tsushima, but last May, Sony said it planned to develop more service-led experiences within its first-party roster for release both on and off console, in line with its increasing focus on mobile and PC releases. Quote, "We intend to build upon our growing experience and ambition in the games as a service space to complement our continued strength in the narrative-led titles that PlayStation fans know and love," unquote. This is what SIE CEO Jim Ryan said at the time. Jim Ryan also said that the decision to acquire Bungie was motivated by his strategy, quote, "to expand the reach of PlayStation to a much wider audience and to evolve the gaming experiences that we build," unquote. VGC recently spoke with GamesIndustry.biz's Christopher Dring, who was the first to break the announcement after speaking with both PlayStation and Bungie's leaders. When asked about Sony's approach to acquisitions in light of Microsoft's spending spree, Dring was quick to point out the different approaches from the companies. Quote, "When Microsoft bought Activision Blizzard, they didn't just buy Call of Duty, they bought every game they've made in 30 years of history. Sony is a little more hesitant," unquote. This is what he had to say after interviewing PlayStation boss Jim Ryan in advance of the announcement. So you can make of that what you will, but we are continuing to talk about this before I give my opinion on these live services. When it comes to the acquisition of Bungie, a lot of people feel as though Sony may have overspent by paying $3.6 billion. A lot of people are feeling that that's a little bit too much for a single studio. However, we have more information on this that explains why Sony paid so much. So again, reading from VGC, it says Sony has revealed a third of its $3.6 billion acquisition of Bungie will be spent on employee retention. As part of its February 2022 earnings report for Q3 2021, the company showed a slide explaining that of the $3.6 billion being put aside for the deal, around $1.2 billion of this will be used to reward existing employees as long as they don't leave. Because Bungie isn't a public company, the majority of its shares are owned by its employees. Since one of the main reasons for Sony's acquisition is to make use of Bungie's knowledge base, it plans to incentivize the shareholders and other creative talent to continue working at Bungie after the acquisition closes. These amounts will be paid over the course of several years after the acquisition closes and will be recorded as expenses for accounting purposes. Sony expects that around 2/3 of these payments will be made in the first 2 years after the deal is finalized. So before we go back and talk about the 10 live service games that Sony's planning to launch, I wanted to address this briefly because there was a lot of conversation surrounding this acquisition. Some people thinking that Sony may have made a mistake or maybe it was too reactionary. We did hear that this was a deal that was, done over the course of 5 to 6 months. So it was in no way, quick reaction or response to the Activision Blizzard acquisition by Microsoft. And Sony made it clear that this acquisition was not necessarily just about IP. That is obviously a big part of it with Destiny and their new IP that they're developing, but it was more so a play for talent, a play for expertise that Sony can then leverage. I know we discussed this, but again, if you need to know just how serious Sony is about utilizing this talent and retaining this talent so that way they can grow it and their internal studios at PlayStation Studios can learn from these talented individuals, Sony is putting a lot of money on the line as incentive and bonuses for these individuals to stick around and not just kind of cash out and head out, because that is a common thing that happens with acquisitions like this. And so this does fall in line with Sony's strategy from the beginning. And that's why I'm highlighting this, because a lot of people believe that what Sony did here with Bungie was purely reactionary, was purely just for the sake of looking like, hey, we can acquire people too, and we can make big moves too, and to kind of stand out. But that's not the case at all. This was very much a strategic and purposeful acquisition. It was not something that was done rapidly and out of panic. It was something that was calculated. And I wanted to be sure to make that known because Sony setting aside $1.2 billion to retain the talent tells you everything you need to know about this acquisition. And so we are going to shift gears and talk about the 10 live service games that Sony now has in development. And I know that not everyone is going to be excited about this, but the big concern, I think, for anybody who is reading this news, for those who are concerned and what I've been seeing, it's that Sony is clearly getting ready to abandon single-player narrative-driven experiences, the games that we all love that PlayStation makes. And I'm here to let you know that is never going to happen. I think people forget that just last year, Sony's Herman Hulst went on to say that single player games are at the core of PlayStation. It's within their DNA and they're never going to stop making them. I think people are quick to assume that if Sony has a few successful live service games, even if they're extremely successful, that Sony's going to become, say, the next Rockstar and kind of abandon making these single player games and just stop. While there is always the slight chance that could happen, I think that Sony is in a very different position. It's worth remembering that Sony has spent decades, literal decades, building some of the most talented studios, cultivating that talent, nurturing it, making sure that their development teams and their developers are happy and doing what they want to do. Now, if you think that every single development team at PlayStation Studios wants to work on a live service game, you're wrong. Sony knows that they don't want to do this. They don't want to convert every one of their teams, but what they are doing is they're expanding their teams, they're building their teams, they're allowing their teams to develop more than one or even two games at a time. And one of these games can be a multiplayer game. One of these games can be a live service game. And not only that, they also have partnerships as well. So I'm just saying all this because I know that 10 live service games is a lot, and there's no doubt that that is a lot. I really have to wonder how Sony is going to balance this if they're planning on releasing all of these live service games in such a short period of time. But it's not going to come at the expense of their single player games. And that's really just the point I want to drive home. I'm not saying that in the long term, like 15, 20, 25 years, things couldn't dramatically change. No one knows what PlayStation's going to look like that far into the future. Literally, no one knows. So it's not even worth trying to imagine what it would be. But in terms of the next 5 to 10 years, I feel extremely confident in saying that no matter how successful Sony is with their live service games, they're always going to stick to single player as well. And something else I do want to highlight with this, because people are probably wondering, why is Sony pursuing live service games so aggressively? Well, I think most of you already know the answer to that. It's a revenue driver. We know that add-on microtransaction revenue. In fact, I think Sony even cited this themselves when talking to their investors. That's where they make a ton of their money. And we know that the games that Sony is developing are becoming more and more expensive every single year. So in order for Sony to keep up with that, on top of releasing some of their games on the PC and expanding into mobile, they're going to have some service games as well to kind of have that constant and consistent revenue stream. And ultimately, that could mean that Sony Studios will grow even bigger. They'll be able to make even more games. And in the end, we could actually end up seeing more single player games because of this. So it's not really as negative as I think some people are looking at it, but I do understand why people are concerned initially when they see 10 live service games. There's no doubt that's a lot, but I've told you guys many times, just my personal opinion. I love single player games and I love multiplayer games, and I'm actually really happy to see that Sony is going back to developing more multiplayer games. I think people forget that Sony is no stranger to multiplayer. If you go back to the PlayStation 3 generation, Sony was doing exactly this. The only difference between now and then is live service games were not really a thing during the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360 days. Those were kind of the early days of online multiplayer gaming. Obviously, Sony kind of took a break from that, but now they're returning. And during that period of time, even when Sony was making a bunch of multiplayer games, they were still also delivering a ton of awesome single player games as well. So I don't think people have to fear this at all. I think it's actually going to be a good thing in the end. And so I wanted to be sure to cover this extensively for you guys, because it was a very interesting topic that I definitely wanted to cover. But we're going to end this video talking briefly about some sales numbers regarding the PS5. This is reading from Push Square, where it says PlayStation 5 console sales have now reached a total of 17.3 million as of December 31st, 2021. It means Sony sold a further 3.9 million units during the third quarter of its 2021 fiscal year. However, while the PS5 has been the fastest selling PlayStation console of all time during its lifespan so far, these latest results mark when that is no longer the case. During the same time frame last generation, Sony sold 20.2 million PS4 consoles. Sales are also down compared to the same Q3 period of the previous fiscal year, when Sony moved 4.5 million PS5 systems. The Japanese company has blamed the ongoing semiconductor shortage for this, which has made producing the consoles at a rapid rate much harder. Sony expects these supply issues to continue, but also reckons the difference will be made up over time, with future quarters returning high sales numbers. As a result, Sony has lowered its overall forecast for PS5 shipments for the fiscal year to 11.5 million units. This is down from 14.8 million. Its projections for the full year revenue estimates of the company's games and network services division is also lowered by 1.48 billion. So this is, I think, very important to highlight, because now we are at that point where we are seeing the semiconductor shortage having a tangible negative impact on Sony's bottom line when it comes to console sales. And this is something we absolutely want to pay attention to for those of us who care about the health of the console gaming market, because we don't want to see this linger. I suspect this will continue all throughout 2022. And I think there is truth to what Sony's saying here. I mean, it just makes sense that it would happen this way. They are expecting kind of an uptick and things to kind of turn around later on in the future when the semiconductor shortage is either not nearly as severe or just pretty much no longer a thing. I've said it before. I think that the PS5 could end up being one of the best selling consoles of all time. Not necessarily better than the PS2, but one of the best. But it's only going to be able to do that if this shortage doesn't linger for another 2 or 3 years or something like that. And I don't think it will, but it's having a tangible negative effect right now. And so hopefully this is something that won't linger. But to close out this video, Sony has given us an update on PlayStation Plus subscriber counts. Once again, from Push Square, it says there's much talk about Sony's failings in the subscription space, but it's worth remembering that PlayStation has by far the most successful service in the industry right now. PS Plus reached a new record number of active members during the quarterly period ending on December 31st, 2021, reaching 48 million. This is the highest number that the service has ever achieved and is up slightly compared to the 47.6 million registered during the same period last year. So there you go. If you're wondering how well PlayStation Plus is doing, it's still one of the biggest subscription services in the world when it comes to gaming. So yeah, that's going to do it for this video, guys. I hope you did enjoy it. I hope you did find it informative. Again, leave it a like if you did, subscribe if you're new, hit the bell notification icon, and feel free to share this video out on top of all that. But until next time, guys, take care.